I finished Last Contract of Isako this morning, and I know it's a dystopian book and I understand the genre, but my god, was it depressing. What an awful outlook on the world. I feel like I feel deflated after finishing it, and I did have a good time, but I don't know, I'm mixed feelings about the whole thing. Yeah, let's talk about it. Welcome to Spoiler Talk, where I talk about books in all spoilers because I don't like reviewing things all like mysteriously. And I just want to talk about books. So yeah, the first little bit will be a brief summary of the book, and then after that, all spoilers. I got an early copy of this book from NetGalley. I originally requested it because I loved Jade City. I never got through Jade War, but I did like the way Fonda Lee wrote fighting, and I knew this was a dystopian. I love dystopians and fighting and all those sort of things. I also saw some great art. I think it's the Broken Binding. They're doing a special edition of this book, and I thought the art looked really cool. So I felt like it would be my kind of thing. This book is exactly what I would expect from Fonda Lee. So either for you, that's a great thing or not a great thing, you know? Like there's a lot of talk about moves and business kind of meetings and things like that comes up in the Greenbone book. Greenbone? Yeah, Greenbone. I think all the Odyssey talk is the hardest thing for me in that series. I'm pointing, you can't see, it's down here. I only got this far into Jade War. I loved it because of the fighting scenes, which The Last Contract of Isako has, but I struggled because of all of the business meetings and talk, which The Last Contract of Isako also has. This book is set on a colony planet that's been established for about 500 years. They're completely cut off from Earth. The planet isn't really livable, but they're under this like dome, so resources are scarce, and they're working towards terraforming the planet to one day in the future be livable, but that future isn't going to be anything that any of the characters in this book are ever going to realistically see. Underneath this dome, instead of like a government, we have these companies that rule everything, and each of the companies own divisions of different places, and then that is the political stuff that's going on is between all these companies underneath this dome, kind of fighting for sort of resources and what path they want to go for in the future and what vision they see. Some want to explore the stars, some want to terraform, some want to do this. There's all these different factions. There's also loads of different religions, some from Earth, some new. The world building is really in depth. It's really in depth, which for me was a struggle in the beginning. I didn't know what was going on. I confess, I was very confused. I find the company names really confusing to follow because a lot of them are like shortened things. So it'd be like Sat Ops, NavPro. NavPro doesn't exist, but you know what I mean. It's all these like little like two names that are shortened from like some longer company name, and I just could not follow who was who. We're following Isako, who's an A tier for one of these companies, and she carries this like long knife, which sort of is in the style, I imagine, of a samurai sword, because they also take up these like positions that feel very like martial arts. I'm betting they're real things. I have not looked into it though, but I'm almost certain they have to be. I could be wrong, but it feels like it is. I believe Fonda Lee's a black belt, which is where all this stuff comes from, and also why I think she writes fight scenes really well, because I feel like you have to know how to be hit. I feel like the best people who write fight scenes in books are authors who have at some point been hit by someone. I don't know, if you're interested in writing a book, just think about taking up like a class, a light sparring class, and feel what it's like to be hit in the face. I just feel like it would be really helpful. Anyway, the premise of this book is obviously Isako's last contract. In this world, the resources are scarce, so there is this thing of if you retire, you walk out into the vastness, and that is you like retiring. It's also this idea of working is your life. The company is the entire world. It's once you aren't working anymore, you're not living anymore, seems to be kind of the setup of this world, which is interesting and horrifying and very close to where we're going. But yeah, so this is Isako's last contract. So her last contract also kind of means the last thing that she does in this world before she retires forever. I find Isako very hard to root for. I found it really difficult to kind of latch on to what her goal was. I know logically what her goal is. I just didn't feel it with her, you know? And I don't know, that was maybe my struggle with getting through this book in the beginning. I'd say once it clicked for me, it clicked and I had a great time, but I found the beginning bits very difficult. That's everything I'm going to be saying that's guaranteed to be spoiler free, so that's your warning. From here on out, I will not care about spoiling the book. Watch at your own risk, I suppose, or leave, read the book, come back. I really like this idea of walking out into the vastness. I think this is something that comes up in a lot of dystopian media, especially what it reminds me of is The 100 and Wool by Hugh Howey. The 100, we send 100 kids down to Earth and they kind of test to see if it's hospitable, and it's also a reason to preserve resources. Oxygen, I think, is running low on the ship, and then it also serves them to see if Earth's okay. And then, like with Wool, we have people walking out into the vastness. I can't remember what it's called in Wool. Everyone watches and they see how far they get. And normally they fall at a certain point, and it's always, and then the big thing was that someone, you know, if they get further, I'm trying not to spoil Wool, I've just realised. But, you know, it's like a similar idea. And yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was really interesting. It does not come up again. It's good that it doesn't come up again because it means no one's being sent to their death, I suppose. I'm just so conditioned to be like, that's going to come up again, that's going to be a lie. Not everything in dystopian books has to be a lie. Sometimes the environment can just be bad. I like the beginning bit and I like the setup. I just find it really hard to connect with Isako as a point of view character, and I think that was my struggle in the beginning. I just didn't know what she wanted, and I think because I was so confused with all the different company names and who belonged to who and what any of it really meant, and there was this talk of like a war between the companies, and in the beginning I did not really understand what that meant. After finishing the book, I'm still unclear what that war was. If I was to take a guess, I would say that they're fighting to absorb the other company. So they're kind of fighting for territory because they each have like physical space as well as like space on like board members and employees and things like that. I don't know. And I guess it doesn't really matter. Something I also found really jarring, but not like not in a bad way, just in like a, oh, this is weird, was all this company speak that's like talking about violent acts and like the war. Like we have talks of like mergers, but with ambushes, and it's all just nothing quite sits right because we don't talk about mergers having ambushes and people being injured during mergers. So it's all very interesting, and I find this book very bleak. I would read another book set in this world though, because I do find it interesting, and it's very like Murderbot as well, of like, you know, the company is now the thing that runs everything. So because I didn't understand any of the company stuff or what the board was, I was really struggling to feel connected with Isako and what she wanted, you know? Like, I know that she wants to finish her last contract, but I just didn't really care about the last contract because I didn't understand. And I know in books you're not supposed to understand things right away. But for me, I don't know why this book felt different. It just I really struggled. I didn't even feel really interested in the like mystery of like, ooh, why don't we want Sandbar Uchi on the board? Because I didn't know what the board was. And I didn't know why it mattered, you know? Because you know what it is. Because the A tiers aren't really invested in anything. The A tiers run by the code and they are blindly loyal to the person they're working for. So from that, because of that, Isako none of it really matters to her. So it doesn't matter to me. I know it matters to her because of the code, but it doesn't like matter to her, you know? I don't know. It was interesting when Martin died and then the other guy, I think he's called Conrad, I could be wrong, the puppeteer guy picks Isako up in the car and they drive around and they're talking, and my struggle with that was that I, again, was so confused with all the company stuff, I couldn't work out who he worked for. And I'm sure we learned that, but for me, in this book, I just really wasn't sure who he was to any of it, because even if I understood who he worked for directly, I didn't understand what that had to do with which companies. I couldn't remember what Sandbar Uchi's company was at the time. So I think I needed you know what? I think I probably needed, and again, this is the NetGalley copy, so I don't know if this exists in the real book. I would need a full company list of who works for who's on what thing, and who's who. If I had a little graph that was like, Martim, A tier for Sandbar Uchi, who runs SOCON Gas Crow. This guy, that's, I think, what I needed to kind of connect who was who, and to then appreciate the political moves and workings that's going on in this book. I should, in theory, be able to follow it without other aids, but I really struggled. And you know, maybe I could have tried harder. I also might have done more flipping back and forth if I had a physical copy. My Kindle is like 10 years old and I'm never going to buy a new one. So I don't really like go searching for things because it's so slow. But yeah, I struggled. The saving grace for me of this book was Cobb. First of all, I just really loved his entrance. I loved her going to this nightclub, which had like a really dorky name. It's like Epic Vibes or something. I love this idea of people with shared history, so I really enjoyed the fact that Cobb then steps out and he's this like really imposing, scary guy, and he's like, this is my friend. I really needed someone like Cobb in this story for Isako to bounce ideas back and forth and to sort of help me sort of understand what's going on. And I think from him appearing onwards, I was more clear on who was who and what was going on. Maybe it wasn't Cobb, maybe it was just because I'd read further into the book, but I feel like from Cobb onwards, I was a bit more clear on what was happening, and I just really liked the addition of him. I thought he was really interesting. I liked his little flat. I liked this, like, him having eggs was really fun, and this whole thing of Isako seeing him as this really successful A-tier, but now he's in the Ronin status, which she would look down upon, but she doesn't want to look down on Cobb, so it's this whole, you know, interesting thing that she's got with people being employed and not being employed, you know? Also, on the egg thing, Cobb gets this thing called off script, which is like this lower rung of money, which I find so interesting. And he's saying, oh, well, I can't just walk into like a fancy market and buy eggs with off script, because you're kind of priced, you're not only priced out of the ability to buy eggs if you're a freelancer, you're like, there's this actual barrier in that your money is different. So no matter how much off script you earn as a freelancer, you will never be the same as someone who is hired by the company and gets paid company money. And I find that so fascinating. Because in this world, there's this belief if you work hard enough and earn enough money, you can get to the level of, you know, the highest people. And can you? That's, I suppose, a different debate in a different video. I would say no. But this book makes it very clear that even if you work hard enough as a freelancer, you will never be able to get into the other rung of people who are earning like the official money. And the equivalent of if you just work hard enough is how Isako feels towards the people in the warehouse. Of it's like, if you just took this specific job of like whatever it is that's like an official job, your situation would be better. Or if you just retired and did the right thing and walked out into the vastness, that would be better. That would be better for your family. And yeah, it's weird, but I do really enjoy it. Isako really looks down on the freelancers and the people who are living in this big warehouse to the point where she's judging them and thinking of them as like selfish for having their children with them and not sending their children off to like be raised correctly like how she raised her kid. I really like the freelancers, and I don't know, maybe it's because of all the other books that I read, but I do struggle when we see like a rebellion group to just sort of be like, I want to be with them actually. I find Waterboy really fascinating. I think a lot of the things that he was saying to the masses sounded very reasonable to me. I don't know, maybe I'm a problem. But Isako sort of thinks of him as like this proselytizing mascot, which I think is her sort of instantly putting him down as like this sort of nonsense pawn that's being used, and she kind of writes off anything that he would have to say, even though he is the one person who's escaped the place and was there for the context for the Field 95, the big air shield failure that happened that Martim is covering up. So he's like the one survivor of that, and Isako immediately writes him off as this like person that isn't in his right mind and doesn't understand what he's saying. But he's the one person that was really there. And you wonder, if he was working a real job, would Isako have maybe taken his word a little bit more seriously? Even if he was exactly the same demeanor and everything, would she maybe have valued him a little bit more if he had a proper job? I would say so. So in order to stop Sambar Uchi getting into the board, she's decided to kill him. So she makes this arrangement with the freelancers, kind of just using them, obviously, to make a distraction so she can get into the center where the synth bodies are, so she can like catch him unawares and have the place locked down with her inside, which I think is a good plan. I think it sounds great. It's pretty successful actually, and it's I highlighted when I suspected. And she met with Sambar Uchi previously, and they were quite suspicious that he agreed to a meeting, and then they arranged for them to be taken off in that car, and they had the Shadowcon sent after them. So then they, realized that Sambar Uchi is hiding something deeper. And I didn't really click about what that was. So I confess, I only realized what was going on with Sambar Uchi when Cobb calls Isako, and she's like locked herself into the center with him. She's gonna go kill him, and Cobb is like, "Oh, I checked the records. Martim has no like early onset grey waste proof," which is the thing that they thought was going on because they found this like capsule thing in his flat, I think. Yeah. So they suspected that, like Cobb, Martim had this like degenerative disease. Allegedly, Martim had an overdose because he was discovered for using illegal drugs because he had Grey's waste, which was what Sambar Uchi told them. And then Cobb rings and he's like, there was no proof that Martim had early onset Grey waste. We can't find it anywhere. And it was that point, maybe quite late in the game, I'd love to hear what other people figured this out. But it was that point for me when I was like, oh, it's not Sambar Uchi in the synth body thing, it's Martim. And yeah, so that was really fun because then we have Isako running up. Isako hasn't figured this out, and she's like having this fight with the bodyguard, and she gets in and she sees Sambar Uchi's synth body standing over this pod that's got body of Sambar Uchi in it. And then my confirmation nail in the coffin was like the synth body Sambar Uchi being like, no! And the way he said her name just felt so familiar that I was like, that's Martim. That's Martim. That's definitely Martim. And then we switch POVs. And so I'm like, as you can tell by how animated I am, I was in it at this point. I was really excited. I was really enjoying the book. And we switched to Martim. And this was my favourite section of the book. If I could split up my rating of this book, I would give Martim's section 5 stars. I'm unsure about what I would give Isako's, if I'm being honest, but Martim's section on its own gets 5 stars for me. I thought it was great. And that's not to put down Isako's bits, because the things that we learn in Isako's section is what makes Martim's section so good, because it's going backwards and we're now filling in all the blanks, all the mysteries of Isako's section are being revealed in Martim's, and it was just done so well. I really enjoyed it. I loved finding out about the Field 95 disaster and how Martim was hired in the first place. It was really interesting. As his section went on, I started to get more worried that he wasn't actually in the body, because I was really cocky in the beginning. And then I started to think like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. But I felt like there were little like clues like sprinkled in to sort of hint at it. Like we have Sambar Uchi sort of referring to Martim as like a younger version of himself. We get to see what happens to the bodyguard and how she ends up in the ex-wife's synth body, which first of all is then proof because it's showing us that another person can sit in a synth body that isn't designed for them. So I feel like that in itself was a clue in Isako's section that I could have picked up on, but it didn't. So yeah, we see in the past that event happen where the United Freelancers bombed Sambar Uchi's car, and then the bodyguard was injured and almost died, and they decide to use the spare body that they have around to keep her alive, which really complicated for me because it feels in the moment like Sambar Uchi is doing a good thing and he might be a good person, because he's like saying, it's the least I can do because you saved my life, and it's also an investment, and it's like I felt like he was being a good person. And then we learn that he doesn't allow her to change anything about the body. And I know people can be two things. In the beginning, I saw it like a good deed, but in like a businessman way. Like he was offering her the body because like that's the right thing to do because she saved his life and now he's going to save hers. Like it benefits him as well because now he gets someone who is loyal to him and won't leave him. And that's, I thought, like, yeah, that makes sense. He's a good person. He's just a businessman and kind of does want to make sure that lots of things benefit him as well. You can't get that far in the company without being like that. But then my realization that he's actually maybe not as good a person is that he doesn't let her change anything about herself. So maybe feel less like she's wearing his ex-wife's skin. Some people might argue that's him being stubborn and like valuing the like original intent of the synth thing, and it would be disrespectful to change it. And I think that's like the spiel he gives her. But I do believe the ex-wife that this was just another way to have something, hold something over her, and it wouldn't work if the bodyguard changed something about herself and made it into her own body. It had to be the ex-wife's body to be seen like standing around her. So I went from what happened was that was Isiko's opinion in the beginning, is that he's given that body to the bodyguard to sort of like have one over on his ex-wife and to torture her, so she always sees herself standing with him. Awful. Then I thought, oh, he's actually a good person. This was just to save her life, and this was the spare body that they had. It just happened to be his ex-wife. And then I went back to, oh, this was just him trying to have one over on his ex-wife. Anyway, what I'm saying is that felt like a clue, because at the time when she was injured, Martim thinks, oh, well, this is a very unusual circumstance. There isn't normally a spare synth body sitting around. And we had learned that there is a spare synth body for Sandbar Uchi. So my detective brain was like, yes, that's a clue, because something's going to happen and they're going to be like, oh, well, we have a spare synth body lying around. And then we get this time where Sandbar's injured with a concussion and Martin has to fill in for him, and he enjoys it and he does it well, which to me was like the final thing of being like, he's definitely in the body now, because that was like a little test for him to see. I just didn't know how, and the whole time I was reading it, I kind of felt like it was something that he and the bodyguard sort of conspired together and did something, you know, to Sandbar. Maybe like he accidentally died and they didn't know what to do, so Martin went into the body instead to cover it up or something. Like, I thought there was going to be more of a conspiracy, I think, behind it. I maybe was just reading too much into it, which is a silly thing to say about a book. I thought it was going to be like a chaotic snap decision that they were forced to make, but it turns out that it was a calculated one by Sandbar, in that he's got grey waste, cannot go into the synth body himself, wants to be on the board because him and Martin learn that Earth is calling. Interesting. So Sandbar really wants to be on the board so that he can be like, no, we're not telling the people that Earth's calling. I do not want that. That's going to be bad for humanity. And he believes in that so strongly that he's willing to put his A-tier in his body and act on his behalf. Huge risk. And then we learn later on that Sandbar always intended to go back into the body. He lies and tells Martin that he can keep the body and do what he wants with it afterwards, which naively I believed, even though I know I saw the body. We saw Sandbar's body in Isako's POV. We saw Martin looking down at Sandbar's real body, and still I was like, yeah, Sandbar's gonna let him keep that body. I naively just assumed that Martin would keep Sandbar's body himself. So when Martin goes into the synth body and we're told that Sandbar's body's been taken away, I was just a little confused, because I was like, oh, when are we going to learn that Martin kept Sandbar? Because I just assumed that he wanted to keep his boss alive. I don't know. But yeah, that was a real dick move from Sandbar. I think he probably could have just told Martin, I plan to go back into my body at some point and we'll work something out for you. I don't know. Can he just get another sin? I don't know. I don't know how it works, but I just thought it was just a bit mean, considering Martin's, being very loyal to him the whole time. So we go through Martin's whole POV and it all starts to click into place and everything starts to make sense, and we realise the decisions that he made and why he did it, and it's all just really interesting, and I loved having that whole other side fleshed out. That was great. And then I was just disappointed when we finally caught up and we went back to Isako, and I knew we would go back to her, logically. The book is called The Last Contract of Isako. I feel like that makes sense. I just was a bit disappointed to see her again, and I felt quite bad about it. I don't know. I realised that I started to really love the book when I was in Martin's POV, and we switched to Isako, and I was just sort of like, oh, okay, I guess we're back here. I just maybe don't like the way she views the world. Do I? No, I don't know what it is. I feel like Martin's POV felt really hopeful and like there was a future, and maybe as well because he's sort of shown as someone who has a bright future ahead of him, and I'm reading it knowing that he's not dead as well. So I'm reading it being like, oh, he's going to become Sandbar Uchi. That's really interesting. That's going to be really good. This is really interesting. But Isako's is her last contract, and it's sort of, you know, about the end of her days, and her best, like, maybe remaining oldest friend, not oldest, but you know what I mean, Cobb, is going to die really soon of this degenerative disease, and it's all feeling quite low. But Martin's felt a little bit hopeful. Him and Thea, I think her name is. I've never said it out loud, I don't know. But it feels like they're the bodyguard. It feels like they're building towards something. They're going to be doing something. It's going to be forward momentum. But Isako, it feels like she's ending something. And I know that's what the book is. And the book is called The Last Contract of Isako. But yeah, I was just kind of sad to go back to that, I think. So yeah, she kills real Sandbar Uchi, which is technically completing her contract, but not in the eyes of the public. They get Martim. They all start to talk to each other, and all the like things start to line up. They like hatch a plan that they're gonna like finish Isako's contract by having Martim go to Savannah Minto, who was the person who gave Isako the contract in the first place, and they were gonna sort everything out. They had like a plan for everything to be fixed, and he was gonna be a little bit blackmailed for the rest of his life, and kind of under the other director's thumb, but would be living. It's also the thing of like the bad scenario for him in this book is that he goes against his old boss, but to me, I would want the humanity to know the Earth is calling. So to me, that would be a better scenario. Even though he's kind of being blackmailed, it just feels like the better scenario. I didn't want Sandbar Uchi to get into the board and hide that from everyone else. That to say, I was feeling really good about the plan. And then we have him go through the board meeting, and then Isako sees the, you know, Reaper of Reapers, the guy who's hired by the agency to like kill agency staff, and she worries that it's for Cobb. I never connected that it was for Martim. I don't know why. I feel like I'm normally more switched on than that. I don't know what happened to me in this book. It didn't once occur to me that he was there for Martim. I think it's because he's wearing Sandbar's face. You can't just like assassinate Sandbar and be like, that wasn't Sandbar though. That was an A tier. I'm legally allowed to do that. Like, it just feels like an easy way to just assassinate everyone important and be like, oh, it wasn't really them. But yeah, that's what happens. He kills Martim. Martim dies, and I hated it. And I know that this is a me thing, and I just really don't like main characters dying. I just really didn't like it. I didn't like it. It felt sad. It felt sad and depressing, and like, I don't know. I really liked his POV. What happened for me was because I wasn't connected as much to Isako's POV, the story ending and her finishing her contract just didn't feel enough for me. Like, it didn't feel like enough of an ending. Whereas I was really attached to Martim's, and it felt like he just didn't get, his whole ending was just like cut short. And then we get this revelation that Earth has been calling for hundreds of years, and the big meeting that they were trying to get him into to put a stop to it happens every 50 years, and it wasn't this big first time thing. And then we learned that every 50 years the board votes no anyway. So the whole thing was that we were trying to make sure that Sandbar gets in so that he can vote no, but the board was always going to vote no. And and then it turns out that like the other director didn't want him in because it was just this frivolous sort of thing, and that's, you know, petty nonsense of just like, she didn't want this like up and coming young guy to be on the board, but they were both going to vote for the same thing. So it wasn't this huge like world thing. It was just like, you know, the annoying machinations of like the upper class, which I get that's what the book is. And I think I just feel a bit empty. I'm in two minds because I can appreciate what this ending is doing, but do I love a happy ending? I'm sad. I wanted better for Martim, and I wanted better for Thea, and it was just a bit sad to me that the two like promising people were then forced into these old like aristocratic synth bodies and were put through hell, and then didn't see it through, didn't get to the end, didn't get to live. And I get that's what the book is doing, and I'm supposed to feel like this, but yeah, it was just a bit of a bummer. And I was so annoyed for those two that I couldn't even really feel happy for Isako and Cobb. for being, you know, alive and able to like live out their last days together, which is really sweet and nice. But yeah, I was just sad about the other two, that I couldn't appreciate that, because Cobb is still has a degenerative disease and Isako now has a limited time to be alive. Was it 2 years? I think she gets a 2-year grace period. So I am pleased she didn't like walk out into the vastness and do her resignation that she was going to do in the beginning, and that, you know, she's changed in some way to now she doesn't feel shame in not working, and doesn't feel like she either has to be like working her hardest or death, and she sees this like other middle ground that she can exist in for a minute, and appreciate that with Cobb. That's lovely. I just wanted everyone to have that, and I know that is naive of me. Anyway, that's my thoughts in the book. I could talk about this forever because it's a dystopian, and I feel like you could talk about so many little sentences in the minutiae of everything, but I feel like I'm maybe gonna leave it there. Yeah, I did really enjoy it. I had a good time. I just felt a little bit annoyed about the ending. I'm also recording this the day I finished the book, so I feel like it's maybe too fresh. The ending is too fresh in my mind. But I did like it. What I would love to know is, when did you realise that Martim was in Sandbar Uchi's like synth body? I'd love to know that. And also, yeah, I'm always really fascinated to learn when people picked up on things. Like, did you realise that Martim was the one being assassinated by the Reaper of Reapers? Or did you, learn it when I did, when he died? Yeah, that's all. Did you suspect that Earth had always been calling and that they were always voting no? Because I didn't at all. And I feel silly for it now because, like, of course, Earth was always calling. Not always, but like after, was it 200 years, I think? They left them in silence for like 200 years and then they redid contact. And what would you have voted for? Because I think the people should know. I think the people should know that Earth is calling. I'm glad I read it. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye!